Hello again. At times in the 20th century, the mainstream view in Britain was that only those of British descent, that is to say, born in this country to parents who were also born here, could properly be considered British. This was official policy in certain sensitive areas, such as the security services, who would not employ those whose backgrounds were foreign. It was also the practice in certain parts of the civil service, such as the Foreign Office. The view was that there was a definite difference between a naturalized citizen, and that is to say, somebody born to foreigners, and those who were British by what was described as long descent. In other words, their parents were also British people born in Britain, and probably their parents too. Until the Second World War, of course, all but a tiny handful of people fell into this category, so it was not really a major issue. Everybody in the country was British of long British descent. So radically have things changed today that I thought it might be amusing to consider what would happen if that mindset were to be applied to modern Britain. How would it change the country if we started distinguishing between those whose citizenship was by ancestry and birth and the others who have only in the last generation or two acquired any kind of claim to British citizenship? For example, what would the political landscape look like? There have at times, and I'm thinking now of the First World War, and in the years following the end of the Great War, been efforts to prevent naturalized citizens from enjoying the franchise, that is to say, being able to vote. At that time, this related almost exclusively to Germans and Austrians in this country, but these days it would, of course, affect many others. Take our capital city, where those of long British descent are a minority, and almost two-thirds of the people are those whose parents were foreigners. I wonder if anybody seriously imagines that a man like Sadiq Khan would be elected as mayor if only British people whose ancestors were British were able to vote. There are, too, a number of parliamentary constituencies where the number of foreign-born voters, or those whose parents were born abroad, are crucial to electoral success. Many of these are, of course, Muslim, and it can hardly be a coincidence that successive governments have been so keen to appear friendly towards this religion and to avoid criticising it. This is particularly the case with the Labour Party, but one sees it too with the Tories. This is in itself a curious situation to have arisen in this country, and one which would have seemed quite bizarre only a generation ago. That is to say that British politicians would be courting those whose families came from abroad and adhered to a faith so alien to our own traditions. I cannot imagine that such a thing would have happened in Britain even 30 or 40 years ago. I'm not sure I understand advocating such a state of affairs, and nor am I arguing against it. I'm simply inviting viewers to think what the actual result would be if we started behaving as we once did in this country, and the only people voting were those whose families had for centuries had a stake in Britain and British interests. I have an idea that if this did happen, we would see some pretty rapid changes politically. It is strange that 50 years ago, a discussion such as this would not even have been particularly controversial, but now verges on what many would claim to be racism or xenophobia. That in itself also shows how Britain has changed so dramatically in recent years.